Hello and welcome back to the Week 7 edition of This Week at the Park. I am your host, Brian Tinsman from Redskins.com, joined by my esteemed Redskins insiders, Tarek El-Bashir from CSNWashington.com, and Evan Redmond from SonOfWashington.com. How you guys doing this morning?
We're doing awesome.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You know, one thing that we haven't really covered too much in terms of This Week at the Park is some of the charitable events that happen on a Tuesday. You know, that is supposed to be the players' day away from the office. But a lot of these guys that have been assembled by Mike Shanahan, Bruce Allen, are guys that, high character guys that want to give back, a lot of guys that are from the community. And this past Tuesday was the 6th annual All-Star Survivor Luncheon for 20 area breast cancer, women who are recovering currently from breast cancer. There were more than a dozen players that showed up, which was easily the highest turnout that I've ever seen. I believe it was the highest that they've ever had. And, you know, it was really kind of a special moment for these women who are going through such a tough time, and to come in and just have kind of a carefree day with these players and just hang out with guys like Robert Griffin III, Alfred Morris, Chris Cooley, guys like that. And, you know, it kind of feeds right into this breast cancer awareness game that we're going to have on Sunday. Of course, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And these women will be down on the field to help welcome the guys onto the field.
Nice.
And, you know, a lot of these guys, it's not that hard for them to show up to events like this because a lot of them have personal connections to breast cancer. So I know, Tarek, you've been in the locker room all week, and you've seen kind of the preparation going into this game. You've seen a lot of the pink gear that's coming out right now. You know, what is it? What's the feeling that you get from these guys? Is this sort of an obligation for them, or is this something that they actually look forward to?
You know, I think that the feeling is sincere. I think everyone at this point has been touched by, someone in their life has been touched by breast cancer. And I think it's great because, you know, the platform that players have, the visibility they have in the community, you know, for them to go out and wear pink cleats or like RG3 wears the pink sleeve, you know, I mean, that sends a very strong message. And if it just gets one woman to go get checked and to maybe catch breast cancer in its early stages, then the whole campaign is completely worth it.
Absolutely. Now, Evan, in recent years, they've actually had some pretty standout performances on breast cancer awareness games, which is usually the first home game in October each year for whatever that home team would be. So last year you had Ryan Kerrigan. A couple years before that you had a game against the Packers. What are some of your memories from those games?
Well, first of all, before I say that, I wanted to say that I do have a special sort of connection to Breast Cancer Awareness Week. I mean, both my parents have passed away a while ago, and so my only really surviving relative is my sister, who was diagnosed with breast cancer a couple of years ago. And I was there when she got the news that it wasn't going to be just a simple, you know, it was not going to be a simple thing. This was going to be a long, drawn-out process with all the things that go along with that, the chemo and everything. And she is now, after about a year, breast cancer-free, and she's been checked, and she's got no signs of that. So for me, you know, it's great to be, you know, involved to the extent that I am with the Redskins and seeing them put so much emphasis on that. So I just wanted to say that I'm really proud to be, you know, part of what's going on here in the small way that I am, and I'm really pleased for that. As far as the standout performances, last year was the first time I ever got a chance to cover the Redskins sort of in a journalistic sort of way. I was in the booth for the Atlanta game, and I watched Ryan Kerrigan for the second year in a row do his patented, you know, jump up, put his hands up, swat the ball down, corral the pass, and run for the touchdown.
He almost dropped it, didn't he?
He did. He bobbled that thing, and then he had probably the lamest Lambo/FedEx leap in the history of modern times. It was kind of like the Landover leap. Yes, the Ralph John, whatever it is. So, but that was a great. You know, that just shows that Ryan Kerrigan. That's just something that he does, and he did it again in the preseason. So it was kind of cool to watch that live when it happened.
All right, let's check out some highlights from last Tuesday's event. As you see, there were more than a dozen guys there, including some pretty names. Let's watch some of the highlights.
This event started 7 years ago. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. There's so much support for fighting the disease, but how much support is there for people going through the fight? What can I do for women in my community that are going through something like this, the best thing for them is to know they can beat it and to feel good about themselves, to feel good about kicking cancer's ass.
I'm 5-year survival this year. I know where their head is right now, and I know in their heart to be able to have the players and to have an organization that supports and to be able to do from the wigs to the makeup to the jeans and massages even, they're not going to forget today. It means a lot.
Great calls. You know, the Redskins are involved with many great causes, but I think this is one of the best. These women are in a fight for their lives. You know, they're true warriors. You know, you feel like you're in a fight on Sundays, but it doesn't even compare to this. These women are incredibly strong, and it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here.
We don't wear pink just because it looks good. We wear it because we truly believe in the cause that it's bringing forth. We get to come out here and make their day, but they really do make our day and make it easier for us to go out and play with the passion for them.
They deserve it. I mean, they've been through something that I couldn't imagine, and they're fighters, and they deserve just to have a day where they're pampered and get to see some guys that they watch on TV, and we can do as much as we can just to make them feel good today, one day. I mean, that's the least we can do.
So I would encourage everyone to talk to each other and become friends and be united and just winning your battle, because you all can.
Now, while it wasn't the breast cancer awareness game last year, you actually reminded me before the show that Robert had his 76-yard touchdown run in pink last year against Minnesota in the second home October game. Do you expect to see any signature performances like that this year that will have the pink in the highlights? What are your expectations going into the Bears game, Kevin?
You know, I think that this Bears game is going to be kind of an interesting game because right now, I mean, there's the record of 1-4, things aren't looking that great, but I think that the Redskins actually kind of match up well against the Bears in a couple of different areas. And the Bears don't always play very well. They're kind of inconsistent. They can look like they are ready to win the Super Bowl one week and then look like, the last place team the next. So I think that there are going to be some big plays. And I'm ready for your bold prediction. I'm going to save it.
Hold it.
I'm going to save it, but I do actually. You're watching the offense get a little bit better every single week. It's incremental. It's not, kind of waiting for this breakout explosion game, and I don't think that's what's going to happen. You're just going to see the Redskins play incrementally better. They're going to run the ball a little bit better. They're going to, find some open receivers a little bit better. I'm not looking for a 76-yard completion or a 76-yard run this time, but I think that you're just going to see a much more focused team that is going to do away with some of the silly mistakes that they've had.
I think having a home win for the first time since Week 17 last year was a pretty highlight performance. What do you think, Tark?
I think the key is going to be corralling Devin Hester because,
who might also be wearing pink.
We all saw what happened last Sunday night in Dallas with Dwayne Harris, and now you've got a guy who's just as good, if not a slightly, a little bit better on kickoffs.
Right.
And Hester, one thing he does is he flips the field, man. He's got the speed, the explosion, and this is a Redskins special teams unit that is struggling right now and just lost their ace in Brian Keel, and they're going to try and plug those holes with some new guys. I think that could be perhaps one of the keys to whether the Redskins get a win or a loss.
Well, we will see. Lots more football to discuss ahead of the Week 7 matchup against the Chicago Bears. Stay tuned for segment 2 coming up next. And we are back with segment number 2 of This Week at the Park. Segment number 1 out of the way. Guys, we're looking backwards at what Robert Griffin III was able to do last Sunday night in Dallas. Of course, the Redskins weren't able to win, but he was able to rush for 77 yards, which I didn't realize at the time was more than he had rushed for in the first 4 games of the season. Yep. So, you're talking about a breakout performance from him. It kind of catapulted him from the back of the pack up to 7th among quarterbacks so far this year. He's right back in the pack of familiar names in terms of quarterbacks that rush the ball. Michael Vick is out in front, but he can stay there. That's not what they're trying to do, but we did see that it jump-started the offense, and they actually had, in terms of yards, their best offensive performance so far this year. Of course, the big problem is that they couldn't score. What do you make of that? And marching the ball into the red zone 3 times, how did they not score? What do you think, Tarek?
Well, I think obviously that it was a huge reason why they didn't win the game. You can't get down into the red zone and walk away with 3 points.
Right.
That's going to come back to bite you every single time. But I think if you want to look at the silver lining, you want to look at the positives to take out of that game, it's the fact that Griffin is starting to show that he can run instinctively again. He showed a burst on just the second game of a second play of the game. If you remember, he was flushed out of the pocket. Mm-hmm. I believe DeMarcus Ware was chasing him towards the sideline, and I think in week 1, 2, and 3, Ware would have caught him from behind. You saw RG3 shift into that extra gear, that gear we haven't seen to this point, turned the corner and got 15 yards out of it.
And Mike Shanahan was talking about that burst, and we really haven't seen that since before week 14 of last year. Well, in week 14 of last year against the Ravens when he initially hurt that knee. What did you see, Evan? I mean, have we turned the corner?
He was faster, and we all talked about the time that it takes for an ACL, and in his case, MCL 2, to heal. And we all were expecting, because it was the first game, all in for week 1, that he was going to be all in for week 1 and he was going to be the old Robert. And I would say we all were expecting that, but there was certainly a large number of the fan base that were kind of shocked that he didn't look as fast as he used to. And he looked almost that fast. I'm not going to go out and say that he is the old RG3 and he's ready to run 76 yards again, but he clearly looked like he had more pep to his step than at any other point in time in the season. And I think that what you're going to see is they're going to start running a little bit more read option because they kind of have to at this point. You talked about bogging down in the red zone. Robert Griffin III scored on some draws on a number of occasions last season. And this time around, he seemed like he had an open slot. And I think kind of Will Montgomery missed
He was one block short.
Right. He was one block short. So, I mean, all Will Montgomery really had to do was just kind of run forward, and RG3 could have picked a side. And Sean Lee made a great play. But I think that the Redskins right now, they're in a mode where they are trying to get firing on all cylinders, and as soon as they get one thing that's going right, something else goes wrong over here. And how you fix it, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any easy answer for it. The football teams are complex machines that don't always function as we would like to.
It's kind of the same thing with RG3. He finally got his ground game going, 77 yards on 9 carries,
and then he
couldn't complete any passes, and he started having miscommunications with Pierre Garçon and other receivers. But the one thing that I did like seeing from Griffin was, as I mentioned a moment ago, he was less concerned about getting out of bounds. And he spoke about that yesterday. He was less concerned about, I don't want to say protecting himself, but trying to make other people happy by getting down early, getting out of bounds, making that sharp left-hand turn out of bounds. He was determined to get some yards when he carried the ball.
But isn't he supposed to get out of bounds? Isn't that what we've always said?
You know what? Absolutely. But it seemed like instead of getting out, when he probably had a chance to maybe get 4 or 5 more yards, he actually, tried to get those 4 or 5 more yards. So
he picked up a couple of cheap penalties along the way.
He did.
That helps.
So he's thinking less and he's reacting more, which is what made him such a special player last year. He also said yesterday when I asked him in the news conference that he noticed that Sean Lee, a linebacker for the Cowboys, started to spy him. So once you have a guy who's preoccupied with keeping his eye on the quarterback, that's one more opportunity you're going to have throwing the ball and even running the ball on the edges. So, going forward, I think teams now, starting with the Bears, they have now one more game plan for and worry about.
I think you touched on it there. I think the biggest thing that came out of yesterday was him talking about his instincts. He was just an instinctive runner on Sunday, and he talked a little bit about that yesterday. Let's hear what he had to say to the media.
Last year you set a pretty high standard with completion percentage, and this year the numbers aren't quite there, and I can imagine there's a variety of reasons. Maybe it's miscommunication or footwork or just missing an open guy. Just want your perspective on that, why you think the numbers might be down and what you can do to get it back up.
Well, that's exactly what you said. It's a matter of miscommunications. There's some missed throws in there. There's some drop passes. And all that accumulates into what the stats say, but it's a long year, and we got a chance to make sure that those numbers do get back up, and we'll make sure it does.
Here it said that some of those miscommunications are a little baffling, considering how much you guys practice. Are you concerned by this, or what do you attribute them to?
I'm not concerned by them. It is frustrating, when you have a situation like we had there in the red zone. But you have to move on from those things. You can't let those things linger in your head. So, for us, we do practice so hard at that kind of stuff, and we just got to be on it on game day.
Do you feel like you guys are on the same page overall?
Yeah, we all want to win, and I think all those guys know what they're supposed to do. They know where they're supposed to be, and sometimes it just doesn't happen that way, and we have to make sure we limit that.
One of the things you'd said in your press conferences, you wanted to get back to doing what got you here. What do you mean by that? What does that comment mean?
It just means you can't lose faith in who you are. You can't lose confidence in what you've done to get to the level that you're at. Countless number of players. You never forget what got you to where you are, and that's all I'm saying. It's not a shot at anything else, and or at the coaches or anybody or anything like that. It's just saying, look, I got to be the guy that I know that I am.
Dance with the one who brung you. He's basically saying that what worked last year is what they need to get back to. Was it a matter of execution? He admitted to a number of miscues, a number of missteps, misthrows. Is that something that can be easily fixed in a week? Is that just a matter of being away for a bye week and then the pressure of the situation? What do you think?
Well, first of all, this couldn't be more timely for our site. SunWashington.com has a full-length RG3 article that just posted this morning talking a lot about this, which is kind of, I didn't know you were going to ask me that, so it was just a happy,
it just works out.
Happy circumstance. Our new writer, Erin Coleman, hi Erin, she wrote a really nice long article about talking about the Will to Win documentary that RG3 was in, and kind of talking about how, his will to win kind of almost gets in his way sometimes, because he's so anxious to win that he makes some boneheaded mistakes in his sort of, throw caution to the wind and try to do every single competitive thing that he can. That's a weird argument, because why are you supposed to be competitive? Well, right now, I think that his competitive nature to try and get back to where he was last year is actually kind of hamstringing him some ways, because he's pressing a little bit and he's throwing, he's putting so much mustard on some throws that he's sailing some passes. And I think he just they really need to have one good performance where he looks like he did last year, and then that will settle him down. Right now he's a little bit herky-jerky with his throws, and he's not reading his receivers.
He missed the entire offseason. I think what you see a lot of times is when quarterbacks go from year one to year two, they use the OTAs and minicamp to learn how to read defense, to hone their footwork, to go back and correct the mistakes they made as rookies. He spent that time working on his knee, not working on his game, per se.
Right.
And I think maybe what you're seeing now is the result of missing so much of the offseason.
The dreaded sophomore slump, is that,
Yeah, I think it's a little bit overblown, though. I'm going to have to depart from what you're saying a little bit. I honestly think that he looked to be a little bit less comfortable in the early games when he was sailing a few passes. This seemed to be something else. He mentioned the miscommunication, giving a route sign to Pierre that wasn't picked up, stuff like that. It seemed to be that they were off by inches now instead of feet. Is that something that is just a timing thing? It's a repetition thing? What fixes that?
I think that's the kind of thing where it only gets fixed by repetition of doing it in game, and you have to just make your mistakes. The Redskins are in a place right now, it's a weird place where they have to make mistakes on the field to get to where they want to be, and the fans have no patience for any of that. And every single thing that goes wrong is like, oh God, I can't believe this is ridiculous. Why are you even on the field? And that's the way that goes. I didn't go to Dallas. I was actually for the first time at a pretty crowded sports bar watching the game. And let me just tell you that everybody has an opinion when things go wrong. So right now, this might just be season long, the place where Robert Griffin III learns to be that elite passing quarterback. And it just might take him a whole season. Redskins fans, you know what? Stay patient. I know you want to get on your Twitter and look at your phone and do all this. If you just relax for a minute and realize that Robert Griffin III is too competitive not to get there, but he might not get there this season.
All right, we got a lot more still coming up. Going to talk about the locker room, going to talk about the defense a little bit, and what we can look forward to against Chicago. Stay tuned for segment 3. Up next. And we are back with segment 3 of This Week at the Park. And we're talking a little bit about character. You know, we mentioned it in the first segment, talking about how these guys are members of the community, how this was a carefully constructed team by Bruce Allen and Mike Shanahan. They inherited a team that really it wasn't a winner, but it also wasn't a team of guys that would play together, that would work together, that would live together outside of the office. And we're really starting to see a group of guys that has the character. What role does that play in digging yourself out of a hole like they found themselves in early this season? And what comparisons does that have to where they were last year, Tarek?
Well, you know, I mean, obviously we saw what happened last year, rebounding from the 3-6 start to make the playoffs. And you hope they're able to draw a little bit from those experiences. You know, this is, by and large, the same group that has returned this year.
Absolutely.
There were not many changes. And, I mean, a lot of that had to do with the $18 million salary cap penalty. I think there probably were some changes they would have liked to have made. But they said, you know what? Given the circumstances, we're going to keep this group together and hope that we can catch lightning in a bottle for a second straight year. And, you know, I think the familiarity factor, the fact that these guys have been together in that locker room, and it is a tight-knit locker room, that they'll be able to kind of inspire one another to play better. Because right now, I mean, you know, if you kind of read between the lines, we were talking about the special teams woes yesterday a lot. And one thing that was mentioned was there are certain guys in that group who just aren't playing as hard as they need to play right now. And I have to imagine that leaders such as Reed Dowdy and Darrell Young and that, they know who's not giving it their all. And because they're familiar with that guy and they've done it before, they're going to pull those guys aside and say, hey, listen, here's what we need from you. And I think the fact this group has been together, they can have those conversations out in the open and try to fix some of these problems.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting is that you mentioned that a lot of these guys are the same, and that's true on starting offense and defense. By and large, they are the same. Special teams is usually kind of a cycle through of some of the younger guys, some of the backups, that sort of thing. And those guys have changed. Yeah. We're not looking at the same group we had last year. Mike Shanahan said, there is no Lorenzo Alexander walking through that door. So, you know, you have to find that next guy. And, of course, losing Brian Keel hurts a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Who picks up the slack there? Who rallies the troops, Evan?
I think it's got to be Niles Paul. Niles Paul was the guy last year and I thought if I had to pick somebody that was going to, I want to say take Lorenzo Alexander's place. You can't replace Lorenzo Alexander.
One-man game.
You know?
Can't do it.
I mean, but he was great, and he was just, every time when I would rewatch, because I don't necessarily pay that much attention to unless it's a spectacular tackle. During special teams, when the game is gone.
Has a number of.
Yeah, he does. But you look at how many times Lorenzo Alexander was either on the tackle or just right. It would have been the guy the guy in front of him not made the tackle. He was always there, and he just had a knack for that, and I don't know how he did it. So you can't really replace that guy. I mean,
he had a lot of want to, is what happened.
You talked about character. One of the things that happens with teams that are struggling with losing records is that you hear the phrase, "Is the coach going to lose the team?" And I think that's where character guys come in. Sure. They're not going to let the rookies who are like, used to winning almost every single game they
Right.
play in college,
Right.
and now they're losing a bunch of games. That character is going to come through and keep this locker room together, regardless of what the record ends up being.
And when we spoke to Reed Dowdy yesterday, he said that he's actually going to bring together the special team groups on Friday to do a little extra film review. So, you talk about character guys. I mean, Dowdy spending extra time at the park and having the juice to go to the other guys and go, hey, you know what? I know you guys want to be going home right now, but we're going to spend some extra time in the film room and fix this problem.
And this is stuff that he would be doing anyway.
That's where character comes in. But when you're able to get the other 10 guys on kickoff coverage to show up and do some extra work, that's a character guy right there.
Head coach Mike Shanahan talked to the media yesterday about a number of issues, but looking ahead to Chicago, here's what he had to say.
Back to special teams, conversation with Reed Dowdy in the locker room. He said that he mentioned Lorenzo. He said there used to be a core of 4 or 5 guys that have kind of always been here that were kind of the special teams guys. He said that group seems to have thinned out. And, like watching extra film on Fridays, things like that. Do you find sometimes you have to go up to a player and say, hey, look, you're playing 25 special team snaps a game. You need to step up and be one of those guys?
Well, if they are one of those guys, they won't be on the team very long. So, first of all, they realize that everybody's accountable every time you go out there. Reed is one of those guys. Reed would be embarrassed about the comment I made yesterday about Lorenzo being one of those guys, because Reed is one of those guys. And he takes a lot of pride in everything that he does. And he tries to rally the troops for everybody to play at the level that he plays. We have a number of new faces in different positions. When you take a look at that game, if you look at it a little differently, if we would have got the ball down on the 23-yard line like we should have, the mistake by the official kept us from getting the ball on the 23, all of a sudden our special teams did a pretty good job. Or if they get the block on Niles, or you take a look at Keel, when he loses his ACL, he's right there to make the play. So you can't overreact. You want to make sure our people are accountable, our guys are accountable. We get better every day. There's a sense of urgency knowing what type of team Chicago is, and you try to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Sense of urgency being the key there, and you mentioned going up against Devin Hester. The road doesn't get any easier for these special teams. This is a group that has hung their hat on coverage for years now. And after a performance like last week, what can you rely on anymore? I mean, you have some issues at returner. You benched Chris Thompson last week.
Right.
You put in a committee of Joshua Morgan and Niles Paul back there, who did well.
Yeah.
But you don't really have a lot of answers right now, and you have a lot of questions. And perhaps the biggest one that people aren't talking about right now is that you just lost your starting long snapper. And all of a sudden, all of your special teams units are going to be thrown off. Field goals, extra points, and punts. So, from a timing perspective, from a chemistry perspective, how fast can they get going?
It takes a long snapper and the holder and the kicker about a week or so, and several hundred snaps to get things in order. They got 4 days. You remember they went through this last year
with Forbath
and Justin Snow.
So
it didn't become a problem. But I talked to Forbath after the game in Dallas, and he said that when Will Montgomery became the long snapper, that 48-yard miss, he says, that's on me. I should have made it. But you should know this: the ball arrived a tenth of a second slower than it does when Nick Sundberg snaps it. So when I got to where my foot was supposed to be meeting the ball wasn't there yet.
Right.
So when it got the ball was on target and it was held right by Saab, but the timing of the operation was off, and therefore he hooked the ball wide left. So I mean, there is a big there is a focus on timing, and that just takes repetition. And right now they've got 4 days to get it together, because this might be a close game.
Right, and there is no backup long snapper.
I'm kind of terrified. Like, what if God forbid, Will Montgomery gets hurt?
Well, he did get hurt.
And then to the point where then who's gonna be? Long snapper is not something that anybody can just be like. Josh Laribas can't get out there.
You played center, didn't you?
I did play center. My last year in competitive football, I played both center and nose tackle.
At 125 pounds.
I'm 5.5 feet tall. I'm a little more than 125 pounds, unfortunately, right now. But I played center, and I was also the long snapper. And let me just tell you first, that's a difficult thing to do, because look through your leg legs and then snap that ball exactly where it's supposed to be and then block somebody who wants to try and kill you 1 second later is a very difficult thing, and I can tell you from experience that you cannot do it on the fly. You can't just bring somebody in there. It took me much longer than a week, I will tell you, to get that down, because I had never done that before. I was always like the flanker guy, or I was a safety and a defensive back playing football before I did those two things. And it was just bizarre. It's a totally different world, and you have no idea. So I would say that I think Josh Arribas is probably going to get some snaps in that area. I haven't seen practice yet. They don't show us practice, I would suspect.
We're almost out of time, but we have just enough time for bold predictions.
Bold
Tark,
prediction.
what do you got?
I'm so psyched for bold prediction. All
right.
You going to go first? Or
I want to hear Tark's first.
Okay.
All right.
My bold prediction is the Redskins do get off the schneid. They pull out a close game at home. I'm going to go 21-20.
Okay.
Because like you said at the start of the show, and you're exactly right, the Bears have a bad case of Jekyll and Hyde.
They do.
And I think they are due for a bad one. They were not great last week against the Giants.
Who do we want? We want Hyde? Is that what we want? Or Jekyll? I don't know.
I don't know who you want in this scenario.
I think Mr. Hyde is the bad person, yes. So my bold prediction is the Redskins will score a special teams touchdown in the fourth quarter, and that will be the decisive margin of victory.
That's not bold. That's crazy.
Probably I should be committed for saying that, but that's what I'm saying.
I will take that and say that this game boils down to a game-winning field goal for the Redskins.
Okay.
We are out of time this week. Make sure you join us next week, and also join us on Monday morning for the Monday Morning Redskins Roundup between 9 and 10, right here on Redskins.com and CSNWashington.com. We'll see you next week.